Hello everybody and welcome to the KE Report. This is going to be a special two-part feature with Forum Energy Metals. You'll have two different interviews, the first one with Rick Mazur, CEO of the company, and the second one with Dr. Rebecca Hunter, Vice President of Exploration of the company. Two different takes on two different basins. Rick covers the 9 properties in the Athabasca Basin, and Rebecca covers the work the company is doing, the 10,000 meter drill program in the Thelon Basin. Without any further ado, here are both those interviews.
Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report, getting an update from Forum Energy Metals, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol FMC and on the OTCQB under the symbol FDCCF. We are chatting with the president and CEO, Rick Mazur. Now we're going to break up the company with a couple interviews this week. This interview is going to be focused on the company's projects in the Athabasca Basin. And then interview later this week, we're going to shift over to Nunavut and talk about the drilling at the Thelon Basin project. Now, Forum Energy is a hybrid prospect generator exploration company. The prospect generator side is what we're going to be focusing on in the Athabasca Basin. And Rick, I want you to more or less explain a news release from May 30th, where Forum entered into an option agreement with Global Uranium, total of $20 million to earn a 75% interest in Forum's interest in the Northwest Athabasca Joint Venture. So already a joint venture that's underway. You are now bringing in Global Uranium to take some of your portion of that joint venture. Let's start off recapping just initially this Northwest Athabasca joint venture that is with NexGen Energy. Can you please just take us through the initial deal here and how this new joint venture then feeds into that one?
Sure, Corey. Thanks for your interest, guys. I have to say that this was a very unique agreement that we did, doing a joint venture within a joint venture. So, first of all, the Northwest Athabasca Project is a joint venture with Forum, NexGen, Orano, and Cameco. There is a 1.5 million pound deposit on there called the Maurice Bay deposit that was discovered in the 70s. So there's a historical deposit on there, and we've got a lot of smoke on that property. Last time we drilled it was in 2013. And at that time, we hit one of these targets, and we got over 25 meters, 0.21%, with grades up to 1.8%. I mean, if we put out those kind of results now, it's fantastic results. But the whole project was terminated, of course, because the uranium market went down. So it's a joint venture with NexGen, Cameco, and Orano. Currently, Forum is controlling NexGen's interest in this project as operator of the Northwest Athabasca Joint Venture with Cameco and Orano. Forum and NexGen jointly own 69.65%, of which Forum owns 43% and NexGen owns 26%. Cameco and Orano own 18% and 11% in the Northwest Athabasca Joint Venture. So that's the current setup right now. 43% Forum, 26% NexGen, 18% Cameco, 11% Orano.
Well, Rick, I appreciate you breaking down the agreement of the original JV here on the project, but now you've brought in Global Uranium, and they have this earn-in option to earn up to 75%. So maybe walk us through the specifics of how that changes the holding that Forum Energy will have in this JV over time and the different stages or the different gates they have to process through to earn in that 75%.
Right. So we own 43.32% currently in this project. When Global earns its 51% interest by spending $9 million, assuming that the other joint venture partners, NexGen, Cameco, and Orano, do not participate, Global will have 51% interest. Forum will have about 20% interest, and then the rest of the interest will be held by NexGen, Cameco, and Orano as they dilute out of the project. So that's assuming that those three parties to this joint venture do not participate.
So, Rick, let's step past this and talk about the project then. If there's more money that's going to be spent by partners on this asset, what should investors expect? What is going to be a budget? What is the work going to be focused on to further de-risk this JV and the underlying asset?
Great question. So the deal with Global is $3 million commitment to exploration in 2025. The game plan is to get that drilling done this coming winter. The targets that we have a myriad of great targets on the property. The idea is to pick at this time 3 of the top targets to test. There is one target called the Spring Bay target that was drilled by Cameco way back before we joint ventured the property in 2009 that intersected some very significant indications of uranium on that Spring Bay target. We're going to go back into that target as a number 1 priority. It's a big gravity target that needs to be followed up from that original Cameco drilling. It's a great target that's going to be our focus. There are easily another 20 targets on the property that have not been tested with previous drilling, and we plan to drill 2 of those as well as the Spring Bay target.
Well, we'll keep following along, Rick, as you have more results from that drilling. It sounds like over the winter season, where we'll have more news the beginning of next year on that. But I'd like to widen the scope out here to talk about just the overall package of properties and different option potential you have in the Athabasca Basin. I think, Rick, over the last year, there's been so much focus on the drilling success you had in the Thelon Basin last year that a lot of people forget you actually have 9 properties in the Athabasca Basin, and we're just talking about one of them here. You also just put out some news on June 12th talking about the deal you have with Traction Uranium, and you're going to be doing a mobile MT survey. But then you have 7 other properties past that. So maybe speak to folks listening about the value proposition in the Athabasca Basin that Forum Energy has.
Yeah, well, Forum started exploring in the Athabasca Basin in 2004, and we've accumulated, as you mentioned, 9 projects in the basin. Our strategy all along as an exploration model was to search for near surface, open pitable type targets. So if you look at our map, you'll see that all of our projects are around the rim of the basin, where the economics are way better than the really deep stuff. We have some 100% owned projects that we plan to advance ourselves, being a hybrid project generator. Our Wollaston Project nearby the McLean Lake Mill, we plan to advance that ourselves. We got a couple of other projects that we majority own, either 100%, like Costigan, which is nearby the Key Lake Mill, or we have 80% control of our Highrock project, which is available for option, which is nearby the Key Lake Mill. We own 75% of the Clearwater project, which is on trend with the Fission and NexGen discoveries in the Western Athabasca Basin. And as you know, Fission just got taken out for over $1 billion today by Paladin. So we have tremendous exploration portfolio that we have control over. Some of the other projects that we have, we're on the Henday Project, which is nearby the Orano McLean Lake Mill as well, Orano Denison Mill. The Henday Project, we own 40%, and the operator is Uranium Energy Corp, which purchased Rio Tinto's interest in that project, 60% interest in that project. So we have UEC as a partner and operator of the Henday project, and we'll see if they anticipate doing any exploration work on that. Another project we have is the Fir Island Project, which Orano spent $6 million to earn a 51% interest. We'll see if Orano proposes a program on that. We're a 49% minority partner. So we have a tremendous value in our exploration projects, all drill ready for our investors.
So, Rick, how do you go about, or how do investors go about seeing some sort of value being given to any of these Athabasca-based projects? As you said, there are other operators, there are other companies that have interest on them, but we don't get much news out of that, and it doesn't sound like there are major work programs going. So take us through what catalyst would be to put these projects more on investors' radar.
Yeah, well, we've just been negotiating and advancing these option joint ventures. Traction Uranium, we entered into an option joint venture with them last year. As Chad, you'd mentioned, we're doing an airborne survey currently. With part of that deal requires that Traction takes a look at drilling in 2025. So that's certainly going to add some news flow and some speculation on our Athabasca project. And the Northwest Athabasca project should be underway drilling with the Global Uranium Joint Venture in the winter of 2025. We're going to be moving that project forward. As I mentioned earlier in the program, we've got multi-percent uranium in the drill core from our drilling over 10 years ago. So, yeah, and I'm being approached right now by a number of companies looking to acquire option joint venture interests in some of our other projects. So, hey, listen, we're focused on the Nunavut project, and we've got some good joint venture partners moving our Athabasca Basin projects forward, which is going to create some great interest. You know, we're drilling now in the summer in Nunavut, and we are the operator of Global Uranium's option earn-in on the Northwest Athabasca. We'll be drilling that in the winter. So there's going to be constant news flow, Corey, between our Nunavut projects in the summer and our Athabasca Basin projects in the winter.
Okay, Rick, thank you for this update. Again, we're going to be following up with the company later on this week to talk about some of the drilling that they have planned and will get underway at the Thelon Basin project in Nunavut. So everyone pay attention to that. We'll post a link to the Forum Energy Metals website in the show notes so you can read over all the details on all these projects that the company holds. And please send us any questions you have for Rick and the team over at Forum Energy Metals. Rick, thank you very much for your time today. We'll follow up with you soon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Corey. Thanks, Chad.
Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update on Forum Energy Metals, traded on the TSX.V under the ticker FMC and on the OTCQB under the ticker FDCFF. And I'm joined today with the Vice President of Exploration, Dr. Rebecca Hunter. And Rebecca, it's great to get you on the show again just to get an update on what you all are doing with exploration this year at Forum Energy Metals. And you've announced a big 10,000 meter diamond drill program, and this is at your Aberdeen uranium project in Nunavut, and this is in the Thelon Basin. But before we get into that, a lot of investors listening may not be familiar with the Thelon Basin. A lot of people are familiar with the Athabasca Basin. So maybe give people some history here as to why Forum is so keen and what other companies are exploring in the Thelon Basin.
All right. Well, thanks, Shad. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, the Thelon Basin. So, I've talked a lot about this, but it's just unconformity basins host these really good uranium deposits. And so the Athabasca Basin is obviously the best one in the world. High grade deposits are these, they're called paleoproterozoic or intercatonic basins. And there's only a few of them in the world. Like, they're not everywhere. They're a certain age. And the Thelon Basin is one of them. And Canada has, a few other little ones as well. But the Thelon Basin is essentially the same size as the Athabasca Basin. and it's just located in Canada's north. So it's actually kind of halfway. It's split halfway between Northwest Territories and Nunavut, and that's what we're exploring. And it's just underexplored. And so it's farther north. Obviously there's no roads in the Thelon Basin. So, unlike the Athabasca Basin that, just has a bit more momentum, had the access, and then they ended up with big discoveries and now mines. The Thelon Basin hasn't had that opportunity at this stage. So, and we're keen on that because we think, there's a lot of potential because of that, and a lot of opportunity to find similar types of deposits, similar size and similar grade, we hope. So.
Okay. Well, and last year you did do a limited drill program. I think it was under 1,000 meters, but you did make an important discovery, and you're definitely seeing not just smoke, but some fire there. So maybe remind people of last year's drill program and some of the results from that program.
Yeah, so last year was great. We got some money, and when we whipped up a really quick drill program. We didn't have a camp yet, so we were working out of the nearest community, which is Baker Lake. And yeah, we did about 1,000 meters, like you said, and the discovery there it's an area that was known. And so when I worked there, like in the previous uranium boom from like 2005 to 2012, I was there with Cameco, and we kind of just tagged into this like zones. So we knew that the area was good. One of the things though is that we were still kind of learning where it was like in space, I guess. Like these deposits can be small, they're structurally hosted, so they can be complicated. They're in fault zones and it's all messy. And so one of the things I wanted to do after I did all my thesis and all that stuff, had lots of time to really think about these deposits and what we hit back in the Cameco days, was drill it at a different angle. And that's what we did. And so we kind of went to zones that we kind of knew, the one zone anyway, Tadagak Main, and drilled it from the south at a shallower angle, because you have all these kind of steep lenses of high grade mineralization. And so when we were drilling it in 09 and 10, 11, we were drilling very steep holes. And so essentially you would either hit the mineralization really well, you're like drilling down it essentially, or you wouldn't hit it at all because you're kind of between the lenses. So hitting it at the right angle was important. And then for the rest of the program, we stepped out from there to demonstrate that it has strike length, that there's something bigger at the Tadagak area. And so that's why, the first couple holes were just to drill it at a proper angle, and then we drilled it at, up to 200 meters away to show that it has strike length.
Well, and now you're there on site and crews are arriving, and there's more folks arriving later this week. So walk us through this 10,000 meter program, because basically you got 10x the meters this year to really go chase some of these targets at Tadagak and then some other prospective targets. Let's start at the Tadagak targets. You mentioned Tadagak Main, and I think there's some known mineralization in the west, but you're also looking northeast. So maybe just talk to us about how many holes, how deep, and where you're looking.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. Again, like we sent out a press release today, and it's the first biggest exploration program in the Thelon for 12 years. So, which was my program 12 years ago. But anyway, yeah, so back to Tadagak. We know kind of those two zones. We have mineralization, kind of over 200, 250 meters. And now I want to step out from there. So the program, we want to do 10,000 meters, like I said. So about 25 to 30 holes at Tadagak, and then we'll do about 10 holes in other parts of the property. But I want to step out from Tadagak now and really show its potential. So we have kind of we're going to have one drill kind of focusing on the west and kind of going southwest, seeing how that pans out, and then to the northeast. And we're using a lot of this passive seismic stuff that we did. So last year we had some ground crews and initiated that ambient noise tomography survey. And what it showed us is that one of the things about the Thelon Basin, which is different from the Athabasca Basin, is that we don't have nice conductors. And so, all the Athabasca projects, especially in the eastern part of the Athabasca Basin, you have these really nice conductors. They always talk about conductors and graphite, and they use EM to find them, and essentially they're fault zones, and that's mineralization likes uranium likes the fault zone. In the Thelon Basin, we don't have that. So we don't have these graphitic units. And so we can't use that geophysical technique, the EM techniques, to find these fault zones. And so what the A&T has been really good, it's a seismic method. So it basically images the earth just like other seismic. You have kind of either some sort of, sometimes they use explosions or they use other vibrations, and then they measure how that kind of comes back to them from these geophones that they place. And then it helps them know what's underneath. Passive seismic is the same method, except that instead of actually making an active sound that they're measuring, they just listen to what the natural vibrations in the earth, and they just leave those geophones out there for longer. What it does is image two things. It images faults and it images kind of potential alteration. And those are two really important things for uranium deposits. They're always in faults, and they always have a lot of clay alteration or alteration associated with them. So being able to image that is very powerful, and especially seeing we can't image faults using EM, we can image it with this technique. So now I know kind of where to chase, and that's the whole big component of this program that we're doing, this 10,000 meters or about 8,000 meters at Tadagac, is using that geophysical survey. It's kind of helped us basically kind of image where those faults are going. So now we know where to target, and we kind of know where to target at depth, because we kind of can image also where that alteration is.
All right, so you're using the ANT surveys to look for the faults and the alteration, because you can't use the EM surveys, but you've got some targets dialed in. You're going to be chasing about 8,000 of the 10,000 at Tadagac, and now you'll kind of know where to look and the direction to drill from last year's program. But you do have these 10 drill holes, and you mentioned there's some other prospective areas, Ned, Bjorn, and Kavik, and some of these are targets that you've been watching since 12 years ago when you were at Cameco. So maybe just speak to how the A&T survey maybe helped at Ned to dial in some targets, but also while you're interested in chasing these other targets, what has you wanting to go back?
So yeah, the biggest thing is that, like, again, like these deposits, uranium likes fault zones, and they like certain rock types. And when we were exploring back when I was with Cameco, we were very much chasing kind of very much a long trend of kind of Orano. So Orano is the French nuclear company, and they have those deposits already in the Thelon, the known deposits right in that area. We surround them. And so we were very much chasing that model, but I always had my eye on this one particular fault that's to the north of where their property is, and it trends onto our property. It's called the Thelon Fault, and the sandstone is still there. So a lot of the targets that we're been looking for, have searched for, or I guess been exploring for in the past, are the kind of basement hosted unconformity uranium. So the sandstone has been eroded. We're looking for these deposits in what we call the basement rocks, these older crystalline rocks. But a lot of the big uranium, unconformity uranium deposits are at the unconformity, the actual contact between that sandstone, the Athabasca sandstone in the Athabasca, or the Thelon for us. It's a bit younger. It's still very old, but a younger sandstone package, and then you got the basement rocks. That contact's important, where those faults meet it. And so these other targets that I really like, so Ned, Bjorn, I have a few other, Mammoth, Ira, they have the potential to maybe host mineralization at that contact. And that's important because the biggest deposit so far, for the most part, in the Athabasca are at that contact, like Cigar Lake and MacArthur. Arrow's an exception, of course, because it's a really great basement hosted system. If it wasn't eroded, maybe it would have had a huge deposit too at the unconformity. Anyways, that's why they've always been on my radar. And even when I was at Cameco, I was looking at these basement hosted ones, trying to demonstrate that Cameco's property has the same potential as Orano's property, but bigger thing I wanted to do before the uranium price crashed is I wanted to get into our targets in the Thelon sandstone and see if we could actually discover some of those actual unconformity type ones.
All right, so it's going to be kind of interesting discovery drilling, but with a thesis behind it where you know there's some pay dirt there, and Orano also, as you mentioned, surrounds the property, and they've got some mineralization, but you're looking at that Thelon fault, you're looking at some of these alteration zones and the contact zones to go chase. So happy hunting, Rebecca. And then a lot of people listening will want to know, okay, you're getting ready to drill 10,000 meters, but how long do I have to wait as an investor before I find out something? And it's a little different than drilling for gold or copper in that you can test for the radioactivity as you're going. So maybe give people just a little snapshot of how you anticipate being able to test the drill core as you're going.
Well, luckily with uranium, it's radioactive. So you know when you hit it because you can use your what we call scintillometers, but they just measure gamma radiation. And so they start squealing if you hit mineralization and it gives you a value, higher the better. So we know that right off the bat. So like I think the plan is, with success, we'll probably post those, you've seen it with other uranium companies. If you follow them, they'll have the counts per second. They'll tell you if it's off scale or it's 60,000 counts per second or whatever, and it'll give you that. So I think we'll do a mixture of that. And then assays, you have to get them for us. You got to ship them, down south and then truck them to Saskatoon. So there's a little bit of a logistic component to getting stuff down south. So you don't want to just send a pail at a time. You're going to want to send kind of a critical mass. So the assays probably more in September, October officially, maybe if we can get a few off sooner. But we certainly can inform investors that we've at least hit good radioactivity with those counts per second values.
All right, I think that's going to be helpful just to know if you're hitting pay dirt and know what kind of mineralization you're hitting, but most importantly, what are the radioactive readings on it. So we'll keep following along with the drill program as it proceeds at the Aberdeen project. And we just had Rick on earlier in the week talking about all of the different projects that Forum Energy Metals has in the Athabasca Basin, 9 different properties there. So you guys have a lot going on this year, a lot of news flow to come. And if people listening in want to follow along with the news from Forum, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you directly over to the website, to their news section. And Rebecca, great having you on the show again, and good luck with the drilling, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Sounds great.